What's going on, guys? Billy here, and ever since I've gotten into aerial photography with my drones, it's kind of sparked my interest to take better photos on the ground. And just recently I upgraded to the Sony a7 III. Well, I guess at this point it's not that recent, but it's definitely helped me take better photos from the ground. And I also take a good amount of shots with my phone, just because what's easier than shooting with something that is literally always in your pocket? Not to mention, these phones nowadays take great photos. Now, in reality, a smartphone will never be able to fully replace a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, but that doesn't mean it can't creep closer to what a traditional dedicated camera can do. We've seen the megapixel counts go up, we've seen higher resolution cameras, and of course the ability to zoom has improved on smartphones, but now we have the ability to add an external lens to achieve different results. And this is by no means new. I've taken a look at something like this before on my channel, but today we're going to be specifically looking at the Sandmarc smartphone lenses. Now, I've got the wide angle lens, the fisheye lens, and the macro lens, which I've been using extensively with the iPhone XS Max. You might remember the reviews I made on the Pixel 3 and the Pixel 3a, which undoubtedly have some of the best cameras in a smartphone, and I really wanted to use these lenses on those cameras, but I only had the mounting case for the iPhone. You know, as I was sitting here planning out this video, a little thought popped into my head, and it's nothing bad for us as the consumer. It's actually something that could prove to be detrimental to these smartphone lens manufacturers in the future, and that's the fact that these phones are now coming with so many cameras built in. So if you've got the Samsung Galaxy S10, it's going to have the wide angle, the telephoto, and the regular camera that you need. There's no reason to go out and buy one of these wide angle lenses. But of course, if you've got an iPhone right now, the XS, the XS Max, or the XR, we only get the two cameras on the back, or the XR actually only gets one camera. But anyway, you get the regular and the telephoto on the back. So if you want a wide angle lens, you're going to need to buy one to put on your phone externally. But with rumors spreading that the iPhone 11 will feature that same triple camera setup, it's going to make using something like this a thing of the past. Now, there is one glimmer of hope here for these companies, and that's the fact that those secondary lenses or those secondary cameras sometimes might not perform as well as the main shooter. So it could be like a lower megapixel count, it could be a lower resolution, but that's something that we've seen in these early iterations of these cameras. Usually now they're pretty much the same down the line, they just have different focal lengths. So that's something that could prove to be pretty bad for Sandmarc in the future, but for now, since I don't have a wide angle, I'm using this all the time. Anyway, the way that the lenses connect onto the phone is via the included case, which is made of a soft touch plastic that has cutouts on the top and bottom as well as on the sides for the buttons. And I'm actually really happy they included a case with the purchase of a lens, just because it makes things easier. But for me, I opted for their Pro case, which is sold separately, and it almost feels like it's wrapped in leather with covered buttons, and the inside is made of a fabric material that will protect the glass on your smartphone from scratches. No matter which case you have though, the lens attaches via a screw mount, which locks in pretty tight, so you don't have to worry about the lens potentially falling out. Now, these do add a bit of weight to the phone because they are fully made of metal, but don't think I'm complaining because they are made so well, and I would rather the extra weight from premium materials over a small piece of plastic junk. With that said though, you won't want one of these attached to your phone at all times, so I usually keep them inside of my backpack. Don't worry though, the glass won't get scratched up, as Sandmarc includes a cap for both ends of the lens as well as a microfiber bag for extra protection. So now let's take a look at some of the example photos that I've shot using these smartphone lenses, because that's pretty much the only thing that matters when you're thinking about adding these to your kit. To give you an idea of how much more you can fit in the frame with these lenses, here is a photo taken with the regular camera on my iPhone XS Max. Now, putting on the wide angle lens, we can fit so much more into the frame. Like, we can see the full height of those trees in the background, and notice that there's no vignetting around the corners or really any distortion with this piece of glass. Now, the fisheye lens, on the other hand, gives you a much wider shot. Like, it is very wide at the expense of that typical distortion that a fisheye lens comes with. The macro, on the other hand, doesn't increase your field of view, but instead lets you focus on very small subjects. I can tell you guys that the wide angle lens is pretty much my go-to for anything that I shoot. I feel like the macro lens is very niche, and I also feel like the fisheye lens gives me a look that I'm not really trying to chase, but with the wide angle lens, it just makes shooting so much easier. I can fit so much more into the frame, and when I'm trying to shoot in tight spaces, it just makes things so easy. The macro lens is cool, don't get me wrong, I just never find myself saying, wow, I wish I could shoot this with a macro lens. It's just not my style of photography. These example images should show you how it can be used, but again, I haven't really had many opportunities to pull this out of my bag and use it in a real world scenario. I'm sort of in the same boat when it comes to the fisheye lens. Like if I want to get a wide shot, then I just go with the wide angle lens. I really don't prefer the distortion that comes with the fisheye lens, but I do understand that it's a certain look that people are trying to go after. And also, let me just make this clear, the wide angle lens is in no way a supplement to the fisheye lens because the fisheye lens is so much wider. Just like those examples I was showing you in the beginning of this video, you can fit so much more into the frame with the fisheye lens, and if you shoot properly, you can kind of mask the distortion, but there's other times where when you shoot with it, the distortion is very, very noticeable. Now onto the wide angle lens. This is the lens that actually spends time inside of my pocket and not just in my backpack. I keep both sides of the glass covered when it's tucked away and find myself actually using it multiple times on a daily basis. You have to learn when you should and shouldn't use this lens because the regular camera is already decently wide in these smartphones, but with most of the photography I do, there's definitely a need for having one of these on me at all times. For example, the corner of the boardwalk photographed without the wide lens will just show the sign of the restaurant and the surrounding stores going down each side, but when we put the wide angle lens on and step closer, we actually get a much more dramatic look with the area running down each side from the corner seeming much more elongated. Wide angle lenses in general can prove to be so helpful. It doesn't matter if you've got one on your smartphone, your DSLR, or your mirrorless camera, but it allows you to remove objects in the way of the subject you're trying to shoot. So if I want to shoot a building and I've got a tree or a telephone pole in the way, I can throw the wide angle lens on, step in front of those objects, and then shoot my entire subject. Now, of course, it depends on how close that object is to what you're trying to shoot. Sometimes there's just no getting around it. And another thing you've got to worry about is sometimes you get this weird like warping distortion on the subject you're trying to shoot, and it's nothing wrong with the lens. It's not this specific lens that does it. It's just that when you shoot too wide, sometimes you've got to deal with that. So that's why I said in the beginning of the video, you've got to know when you should and shouldn't use this lens. Aside from taking artistic photos, these lenses are also really good for shooting daily Instagram or Snapchat stories. We're always interacting with objects and filming them, and getting more room around your subject makes it look better. Whether it be food, camera gear, friends, you name it, it just makes it so much easier to shoot by putting a wide angle lens on your phone. Now you're probably wondering how the video looks when you're shooting with these lenses, and it looks good, but I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been shooting all that much video with them just because when you want to shoot smooth cinematic video, well then you need to add a smartphone gimbal, and then you're going to be adding so much weight with that extra lens, then you're going to need to add a counterweight, and at that point in time you take a very mobile setup and you turn it into something that requires all these different pieces and parts. So for me, if I'm shooting video, smooth video, I'd rather just use my Sony a7 III with the Ronin S, but I know that not everybody has that same setup and you don't want to spend thousands of dollars on a full video setup. So if you wanted to, you could shoot video, but just know that if you want it to be smooth, you'll need a gimbal, and if you want to use the lenses, then you're going to need some sort of counterweight. So guys, that all wraps up this video. If you guys at all are interested in these lenses, I'll throw a link down in the description. You can go ahead and check them out. They're currently being made for the iPhone 10, 10s Max, the 10s, and the 10R. So if you've got one of those phones, then you can go ahead and take advantage of these lenses, as I've been very happy shooting with them. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.